Welcome to my fourth interview of What Women Want, Practical Pointers for Revolutionary Relationships. In my fourth interview, I wanted to address worthiness because worthiness is such an important part of being a woman. Eric Antonette is a regression therapist, a Reiki master, and a life and leadership coach. He specializes in dealing with anxiety, fears, and trigger wounds from early childhood and does a lot of inner child work with his clients. Eric has methods he uses to help individuals find their personal sense of worthiness, which is so important when we want to connect and be intimate in relationships. For this reason, I feel so lucky to be able to share Eric's wisdom with you today as we continue to unpack our topic of what women want. It is my pleasure to introduce Eric Antonette. All right. Well, Eric, thank you so much for being with us today. And I'd like to just start this interview out with asking you a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. So officially, I am a yoga instructor. I am also a regression therapist and a Reiki master. So I do energetic healing. I'm also a life coach and a leadership coach. So that's a little bit of what I do, or a lot of what I do.
Um, yeah, I didn't know you did regression therapy. That's great. So, tell us a little bit about that.
Right. So regression just means to go back. And so I work with a lot of people who are just dealing with anxiety, phobias, fears, wounding, traumatic wounds. And so regression means just to go back to find out what the source of those wounds are. So when we're dealing with a triggered wound today, it usually means that there's a bigger wound behind it. And so in regression therapy, I go back to help people resolve childhood traumas.
Mhm.
Usually the wound that's showing up today is a childhood trauma. And so it's a lot of inner child work.
Yes. So, what is the advantage of going back that you find going back and seeing that?
Yeah, the big advantage is because when we're wounded when we're younger, we're not emotionally or mentally able to handle the wound, whatever trauma is happening. And so there's a part of the whole experience that we end up blocking out. And we're blocking out the feeling aspect of that wound. And that's the one that keeps getting re-triggered and experienced as we go forward. And then when we become mature enough emotionally and mentally, we're ready to handle it, and we're able to go back and actually feel the unfelt parts of the trauma that we did not feel when we were younger. And so when we can actually feel those, then we can actually heal and release that wound, and the triggers going forward no longer end up bothering us as much as they do today.
So, what you're saying is you have to feel to heal. Is
You
that?
have to feel to heal.
Yes.
And, as I said, when we're younger, there's a part that is blocking out because we're just not emotionally or mentally able to handle
Right.
those feelings. And it's normal, it's a protection that we have. But as we grow older, we become more mature emotionally and mentally, and we're able to go back and resolve them and be free of those.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And what kind of yoga do you teach?
I actually teach Kripalu yoga. You might know Kripalu.
I do know Kripalu yoga.
Yeah,
I'm
there you go.
certified Kripalu myself. That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. It's a
Yeah.
great yoga. I love Kripalu yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did a lot of work with the cancer patients with Kripalu yoga. Kripalu actually means compassion. It's the yoga of compassion, and yeah, I did a lot of work with the people who are suffering from cancer. It really benefited them to learn how to relax in their body and to heal.
Yeah. Yeah. I was doing Kapalabhati breathing before I came on here to try and get my brain filled with some oxygen beforehand. So yeah. Well, as you know, this summit, the title of this summit is "What a Woman Wants," and I really wanted to talk to you, Eric, because of some of your work around worthiness and this idea of worthiness and what that means and how we find it. And, so I want to talk about that in a minute. But before I do, I want to just ask you a couple of questions. I know that within your work, you work with women, you work with men, both. But what does it mean, do you think, in this day and age? What does it mean to be a woman today?
I'm not sure I know what it means to be a woman today, but I could tell you that a lot of women come to me, um, and there's usually a theme around why they're coming, and that's to feel safe
Mhm.
and to feel secure, um, and to feel worthy of love. So, a little bit of our topic today, I'm sure we'll touch on worthiness and vulnerability, and you know, for a woman to be in that space where she can be vulnerable, she needs to feel safe, and I think that's a huge role that men can play in helping them achieve that. Um, so, what does it mean to be a woman? I think I think women are a lot about connection, much more so than men.
Mhm.
Um, and for women to want to connect or to feel safe to connect, they need to feel safe in the presence of another. And if we're talking about men, obviously they need to feel safe in the presence of a man and comfortable, safe and comfortable, um, to be able to open and be vulnerable.
So, my other question, my next question would have been, what do you think women need from men or want from men? Have you answered that, or would you expound on that more?
Yeah, I think we could expand on that a little bit more, because how do you make a woman feel safe and comfortable, right? Like, for me as a man, um, I also have to be vulnerable, or I can be vulnerable, because if I open up first and I'm vulnerable, then I think that also encourages a woman to do the same. And I think the second element would be to be in a space of non-judgment. I think if I'm in a space of non-judgment with a woman, then that opens her up to feeling safe and comfortable. So if she can tell me whatever it is, her deepest, darkest secret, and I'm not judging her for it, and I'm just listening, and I'm not in a space of saying it's wrong to be that way, then that just encourages openness and connection.
So, I think that it's very hard to not judge, I think I remember Byron Katie says it's a sky, that's a judgment, right? Like everything is a judgment. So how if you're a man and you're with a woman and she isn't the the way that you think she should be or want her to be, how do you how do you show compassion and how do you help her? I mean, because I think most people really judge themselves the most harshly, right? So what would you tell men, in a situation where they do have judgments and they can't get rid of them, Like what would you tell them?
I mean, personally, I would tell them, like, going into a relationship is like, what are the expectations that you have?
Mhm.
And because that's, the expectations are what cause the judgment, right? So if I'm expecting you to be a certain way and you're not, then I'm going to have a judgment against you. So for men, I would say, look at the expectations that you're coming in with, and are they realistic expectations, first of all, because we all have our faults, right? We all have, and I think that's another piece in being non-judgmental, is recognizing that we all have our faults, and how can we be more accepting, or just be accepting, not more accepting, but be accepting of someone else's faults without judgment, and being compassionate, recognizing that they are the way they are, and something has led them to being the way they are. And if we're here judging it or trying to change it, usually, you've probably had the same experience of trying to change someone from how they are,
Mhm,
and it usually doesn't go very successfully, right? It's a resistance will come up, right? A
mhm.
resistance in the other person will come up if we're there trying to change them. So how do we be in a space of um, without expectation? Because that's really what love is, right? I mean, if true love is being with someone without having an expectation that they're this way or that way.
So, so I know that you're married, right? um, and so a question that I would have is, what do you do in a relationship where two people really disagree? And how do you get back to love? How do you get back to a balance with each other? And like you and I've talked about having 10 on 10 relationships with each other. Like, what does a 10 on 10 relationship look like? And how does, negotiating and whatever it takes to like go head to head when you have to go head to head or whatever, and how do you get back to love? How do you get back to that?
Yeah, great question. So 10 on 10 relationship to me doesn't mean that we never have disagreements, right? We're going to have them. The question is really like how are you having them, and um are you poisoning your relationship in some way with with blame or shame, or pointing the finger saying, you did this or you did that, and all of that stuff that can come in and really make a relationship toxic. So when I'm in a place with my partner where we're in a disagreement, the first go-to mechanism that we have is a timeout. And and then in that timeout, we're both reflecting on how important is this issue to me, how important is this issue to the partner, um, and then it's to be curious about, why do I want what I want, and why does she want what she wants. And so we get to be curious after the timeout, because if things start to escalate in a disagreement, it just becomes dramatic, and usually nothing will get resolved. So that's why the timeout. And then the reflection on how important is this issue to me, how important is it to my partner, and to be really curious about why does she want what she wants, and she can be really curious about why is it that I what I want. And and sometimes just in that curiosity, um the understanding gets created, and the tension level can go down, because now we're not really so much also just focused on winning, in the sense that I get what I want and she doesn't get what she wants. We're really trying to find a win-win scenario where I can have what I want and she can have what she wants. So is there a third alternative? Um, and that's where we really get to be curious about finding a solution. So that's usually our approach.
Yeah,
Time out.
yeah, yeah,
Is this really super important? How important is it for her? Is
yeah.
there a third possible solution? And then sometimes if there isn't, it's like, okay, well, one time you get to win, one time I get to win, if there's really no other solution, or if there's no way to create a win-win solution.
And how do you like talk to your partner about having like a 10 for 10 relationship? Like 10 out of 10. And I mean, like, how do you even have that thought of like, I'm not going to just have a like a regular relationship. I'm going to make it a 10 on 10 relationship. How do you have a conversation like that, or how do you even start to conceive that with someone?
Yeah. So it starts with exactly that, setting the intention that that's what we want for each other, and and then getting curious about what does a 10 on 10 look like for me, and what does a 10 on 10 look like for her. Like what does she need, what do I need for it to be a 10 on 10, what does she need for it to be a 10 on 10. And uh some days it's possible, and some days it's not possible. And again, it's like we also get to be in acceptance that we're human, and we can't always create a 10 on 10 every day for ourselves or for our partner. And yeah, so it's really, again, it's really about curiosity, like how, what would create it for me and what would create it for her,
Yeah.
and just
Um,
building the connection. So, one of the things that we watch for in our relationship is, if we're not building connection, then what will happen is we will just naturally disconnect
hmm,
and go apart. And so there has to be, for us, part of the 10 on 10 is to have a great connection, right? So how are we on a daily basis building that connection? Like what are we doing together? Like what are we building together? What
right.
activities are we doing together?
Yeah. 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 Um, yeah. I was just thinking in terms of like even like there's that term that says if you can conceive it, you can achieve it. So you even have to think that there's actually a conception of what that would look like, and then to see how you could achieve it. And what I'm hearing is that connection is probably like the number one of really connecting. And when you said, taking a time out and thinking, well, why does she want this? And that's connecting with her heart, with her needs or whatever. Um,
Yeah, but and it's not only me thinking about what she wants, it's me actually being curious with her. Like
right,
why do you want what it is that you want? Like
right,
why do you need it this way?
yeah,
Sometimes in an argument, well, we'll never even get to that question, right? It'll just be,
yeah,
I want this and you want that, and
right,
it'll get nasty,
yeah,
right? But the curiosity is really the key. Like what what's behind why it is that you want what you want.
yeah. Well, I want to ask, like, how can a man make a woman feel more beautiful? Like, what are your thoughts about that?
Hmm.
Because we know that beauty is really important to women, and it's actually really important to men. But for women to feel beautiful, even later on in their lives, like well, all of their life, there's that, and where do you see a man's responsibility in helping with that?
Um, yeah, beauty's it's a tough one because I think women can feel beautiful in different ways. And I think, you're familiar with the five love languages?
Hmm. Yeah, but our audience might not. So go ahead and
Yeah,
do that.
so
That's great. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure I know them all off by heart, but I know that, for some women, it's receiving gifts is their way of feeling love. Some is acts of service, some is quality time together. And you can help me out if I'm not remembering all of them. But so for me, a lot of it comes down to, if I'm showing her love in the way that she needs to feel loved, then I think that adds to her feeling sexy, her feeling beautiful, her feeling good in her body.
Hmm.
So I need to pay attention to what's her love language, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, my partner loves compliments, and some women can't take a compliment, right?
Right.
So it's not, for me, it's not the same for every woman. Like I don't think every woman feels beautiful in the same way. So paying attention to what her love language is, I think, is important. And if I'm not complimenting my partner enough, then I will know it.
Right. And how will you know?
You'll make it obvious. You'll make it obvious to me.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, also, do you think like yeah, one of the things that the primates, they say that the like orangutans or the monkeys will like pick things off each other. The females will pick bugs off the men. And I kind of have this theory that a woman needs to be needed in some way. And in fact, if a man will allow her to change at least one thing, maybe even just, his shirt or some, some little style or something, that it makes her so happy. Like that she's like sort of making him, into her man in a certain way. And I think that there's something to that. What would you say to that? And even how a man can I don't even want to say tolerate that because that sounds like, but also like just kind of like cultivate that, like appreciate that. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say is like appreciate that there is something in the feminine that wants to, you know, change her man a little bit or maybe a lot, but you know, just so just to pick a few things off him. Yes. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a great one, Cindy, because it's like it speaks to the reality of my relationship with my partner. I don't know how you do that, but yeah, so she will often, try to make me wear clothes that I don't really want to wear and events that I don't really want to go to. And yeah, my initial reaction is resistance. It's definitely resistance. And um you know so much plays into that, and I don't know how much time we have, but there's this whole aspect of me where I had a former life in business, and I had to wear suits all the time, and it was like, I don't want to wear suits and dress shirts anymore. Like I've had my days, and I get to be me, and I want to be comfortable looking how I look and feeling how I feel. So that it's a great question. Like it's a great question because it's a trigger of mine, and I get to be vulnerable right here that I don't always react so well to that invitation to dress in a certain way. So I don't have a great answer for you. But I also get to be vulnerable and say that yeah, that's a sore spot in our relationship, and kind of thank you for opening my eyes to it, because I get to see it from a different perspective now. Like I can see how important it is to her because I can see how important it is to you.
Well, it might be a love language, you know, like it's just, I think it's a natural thing for women. I don't know why we have that. Maybe it's because we're such nurturers or we're always doing that, but whatever. Yeah, or maybe it's a way of feeling like he's mine. You know, I don't know.
Possibly. Yeah, possibly. It could be that, or there's an image thing, right? Because, women,
True.
also
Yeah.
take much more care of themselves in presenting themselves with lipstick and mascara
Exactly.
and eyebrow stuff, and, blush and all of that. And, here we are, like, out of the shower and barely combing our hair.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Um, let's talk a little bit about worthiness
Mm.
because I think it's a topic that I don't hear too many people talk about. And when I've heard you speak about it, it's been very enlightening. So I'm going to just ask, like, where did you fall into this this place of really talking and thinking about worthiness and working with people about worthiness? Where did that start for you?
Um, well, it started with my own worthiness, right? Like, trying to understand where I lost my own, and actually in dealing in regression therapy with so many clients, it's an issue that comes to me so often. So I often get to see in the mirror, because my clients that come to me are also a mirror for me, and I get to look in that mirror to see, how is this showing up for me in my life. And a lot of the work that I did in leadership coaching that I was doing, that issue came up with so many students. The whole worthiness issue came up quite often, and I think it's much more common, or a bigger problem than most of us might realize. Like, I think, who does not have a worthiness issue in some way, right? Whether it's worthy to be in the job we're in, or the partner that we have, or a parent, or a friend, or in any relationship that we're in. um, the issue comes up so often. So that's kind of what got me involved in it and interested in it to such a great degree. And you know when I held my daughter for the first time when she was born, and I looked at her, like, and you can just imagine doing that with your own child. Like, there's no part of you that doesn't think that that child is worthy of the world, right?
Right. Yeah.
And little by little, I think it happens to all of us that there's some worthiness that gets stripped away, whether it's because, we're told we're not smart enough, we're not good looking enough, we're too thin, we're too fat, we didn't do this right, we didn't do that right, we're not perfect enough. In so many ways that worthiness gets stripped. And 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 so when we look at worthiness in that way, it can be rebuilt. It can be rebuilt by realizing that the child, us, as the day we were born, our parents looked at us in the same way that we looked at our child today, and knew that this child is worthy of the world, of whatever it is that they want. And so I started this practice myself of just closing my eyes and repeating to myself, I am worthiness. I'm actually worthiness itself. And if you try that practice, um, you'll start to feel it in your body,
Hmm.
and you'll
Yeah.
actually start to be it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can feel that. It's funny because like I'm just doing that right now, but it's almost like, what is worthiness? Like, what does that actually even mean? Like, because I can feel something, but what is that actually?
Yeah, great question. And I would even just like invite you to take a step back, or invite everybody who's listening to take a step back and realize, like, when does our worthiness go up and when does our worthiness go down? And so, if we talked about compliments as one way of trying to make a woman feel beautiful, right? So if I'm complimenting you on how lovely you look today, your worthiness is gonna, it's gonna go up. So what are you doing? You're actually giving me the power
Mm-hmm.
to make you feel worthy.
Right.
But if I say, what did you do to your hair today, Cindy? It's horrible. It's not true. It's not true. Your hair looks lovely. But if I said that to you, you know, and you started to feel less worthy, you're
Mhm.
still giving me the power over
Right.
your own worthiness. So just something to reflect on, right? In that whole subject is, how am I giving my power away to feel worthy or not worthy to those around me? Because in essence, like I said, when we hold that child who's just born, they are 100% worthy.
Mm.
It's just us. It's me who gives it away, or it's me who allows you to make me feel more worthy than what I feel currently.
Right. Right.
So if we can just come back to, I am worthiness itself,
Mm-hmm.
to me it means abundance.
Mm-hmm.
To me it means, if I'm actually embodying the concept of worthiness, that means I deserve everything that I can bring into my life, whether it's love, money, it doesn't matter, a good job, whatever it is that you want, the job of your dreams. If you just allow yourself to know that you are worthiness itself, it is abundance. I can bring in whatever it is that I want into my life.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard to bring abundance in when you're holding that feeling of unworthiness, because you might get right down to, you know, breaking the deal or something like that, and then that will undermine you, right?
100%. So, it's a great practice to understand. So if you sit with that idea that I am worthiness,
Mm-hmm.
and just listen to what comes up,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because some belief systems might come up, some criticisms of yourself might come up, some negative feelings might come up. And so then when we start to pay attention to those, we're really understanding what are our blocks to worthiness and abundance.
Right, right. So say more about that.
So it could be a belief system that I'm not old enough to get this job, or I'm not qualified enough to get this job, or that person is too good looking for me. I can't get into a relationship with them. I feel ugly, so they won't go out with me. It could be anything along those lines, right? So when we're really paying attention to those voices, to those belief systems, to those inner critics, that's when we can work on them, right? That's when we can understand or try to dig a little bit deeper into why do I believe that,
Mhm.
and is that really even true?
Yeah. So how would you overcome a thought like that about yourself? Like I'm not attractive enough to ask to go out with that guy or that woman. Just like how would you start to counteract that thought? How would you empower yourself differently?
So the first question I would ask myself is, now that I recognize that that thought is there and that belief system is there, is it true? And there's there if you look around, you would probably think that, or see that there are many men who are not so attractive that are out with beautiful women, and vice versa, right? So is it really that? Like, is it really that I'm not attractive enough to be with an attractive woman? Because there's plenty of attractive women that are going out with men who are not so attractive. So examine the belief system and really understand whether or not it's true. And then there might be some healing work that might be necessary around some belief systems that we have, or some, you know, big unworthiness issues that we have. There might be some healing work that we get to do.
Would that be especially going back to childhood and just finding out where you learned that you weren't worthy?
Usually that's where it comes from. So zero to eight are where our big wounds are, and the where our belief systems are formed. Both the positive and the negative belief systems are formed, and we don't often go back to examine our belief systems to really understand whether or not they're true.
Right. Yeah. We think a thought when we're 5 years old and it becomes our religion, right? Yeah.
It becomes reality,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what we believe becomes our reality.
Yeah. Is there a way in which you find that you can help other people feel worthy or even, in a relationship? Or is it just really you're on your own? You've got to find your own worthiness. And if like I've had people come to me and say, this person is so beautiful, but she doesn't believe it. How can I make her believe that she's beautiful?
Yeah, I would say you can't.
Hmm.
I would say you can't. That's inner work that person gets to do, and to understand that beauty comes in many forms. And yeah, it's like, it comes back to the discussion we were having before, where, if I'm telling you you're beautiful, and you really, you really did a great job on making yourself beautiful today, for a moment you might feel that that's true. But what about tomorrow? And
Mm.
what do you need tomorrow? What do you need me to tell you tomorrow for you to feel the same way? And so it can become, it's not like an addiction, but it can become like
Yeah,
a need that you have, that like you need to tell me every day that I'm beautiful in order for me to really believe I'm beautiful. And
right,
then I might still not believe it. But
right.
that's just giving your power away,
Yeah,
right? It's just another example of giving your power away.
yeah. So, so that sounds like it's kind of a compulsion or an unconscious thing to do. And the only way not to give your power away is to number one, notice it when you do it, and then like what I'm hearing you say is to drop back into I am worthiness, and then come from that place.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Because when you actually start to believe that you are, then everything changes. Everything changes.
Yeah.
You don't need the rest of the world to tell you that you are.
Yeah.
You just know you are.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask a question that I think people would have, and that is, well, I'm in a relationship with someone, and I've really, how can I get this person? How can I get my wife to feel that she's worthy? Because it does come up again and again, and she's always needing validation. And how can I make something stick with her? And so like, is there a way that someone could be taught this, or yeah, yeah? What would you tell a husband or a partner, either male or female? But let's just say, because we're talking a lot about women and how men can help them, to feel safe, protected, empowered. Um,
Well, safe, protected, and empowered is different than making them feel worthy, in my mind.
okay.
Um, so making them feel worthy, I would say, is an exhausting task.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Making them feel safe and
Uh-huh.
protected is not so much an exhausting task, right? So again, what we talked a little bit about feeling safe and protected before, like be accepting, be in a space of non-judgment, be vulnerable yourself. All of those things will help to make a woman feel safe and protected. But worthiness, it's a whole other beast, right? If I
So
have to
you,
make you feel, if I have to do something every day to make you feel worthy, it's exhausting.
right.
It would be exhausting for me.
Yeah.
And so why I would start to ask myself, like, why am I in this relationship if this is what you need me to do every day?
Hmm.
That would be exhausting. So that's really inner work. The
Yeah.
worthiness is really inner work that we each get to do on our own.
Yeah. 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 And that is really hard to be in a relationship with someone who is constantly pulling on that and doesn't ever get filled up from that. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so if you had just one piece of advice for men, on how to approach a woman and to be with a woman, what would you say to them? How to approach and be with a woman? What bit, what advice would you give?
Hmm. I think women crave vulnerability in a man. I think they crave, um, actually, the more feminine aspect of men, the softer side of men,
Mhm.
the gentler side of men, the more open side of men. And for a lot of men, that's difficult, right? It's
Yeah,
not how we were raised. It's not how we were brought up. We were not taught to be vulnerable or open. And I think women crave that. And I think it's great for men who could be that way, right? Because we also need that to be whole.
yeah,
We need to be open and vulnerable, um, because it continues to build connection.
yeah.
And
Yeah, I really see that, when I asked you the question about, picking and clothes, buying clothes and, that kind of thing. And you said, well, I've got to be vulnerable here. What I noticed in myself was it was so refreshing. And it was also a connection. Like you are really connecting with me rather than, oh, I'm going to be the expert and I'm going to know everything to say, like you get to just like be real. And I just thought that was very attractive, like as a woman, it's just like, oh, wow, he's being very real, he's being very honest. And so I wonder, because there's the suggestion, but then there's always like, well, how does one do it? And I think you gave a really good example of when something came up that you weren't necessarily comfortable with or that triggered you, you just said, it did. Then you were like, I'm open to like being curious about why that is for me. And that's a really for men or women, I think that's a really it's very powerful to have that type of vulnerability, that it is okay that there are things that bother you and that you can just say what they are, and then also at the same time go, like, I really want to be curious about why, and be vulnerable about why that is, so that I guess so that I can connect with you more deeply, or connect with myself more deeply, or both, I guess.
Oh, 100%. And you're hitting for me on one of the keys of a successful relationship, right? Is I get to, in a partnership, I get to be vulnerable. My partner also gets to be vulnerable. We get to be honest with
Yeah,
each other. This bothers me. When you do this, this bothers me. Like, and not to shift the responsibility of the bothering to your partner, but to openly have a dialogue about it, to say, you know what, this triggers me, and I either need some space to look at it or to understand why it's bothering me so much. Not, and again, it's not to change your partner or to change their behaviors, but they also get to look at their part in it as well.
yeah,
That's really how a relationship can grow and flourish, when we're honest and when we're vulnerable and when we're open and we're expressing really what's going on with us rather than just being reactive.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And how do you stop yourself from being reactive? Like, I mean, because that's it. Like, I know you said you have a space, but it's almost like there's a habit of reaction, and you know, so like, what has to happen? I know Byron Katie says it only takes one person to have a good relationship. What has to happen in you to not have that reaction?
I have to realize that I've got to a point where um, I am making the situation worse,
Hmm.
and I'm making it dramatic, and I'm increasing the level of tension. And believe me, I feel that in my body as soon as it's happening, right? As soon as I'm triggered, the
Yeah,
tension is there.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and that's the first sign for me to say, you know what, I get to take a time out to understand what's going on with me. Because if I continue any kind of discussion with that tension still present between us, it's not going to go well. And
Right.
I know from history, and I know from example after example after example, that it's not going to go well. And I'm sure anybody who's listening can relate that whenever we're in a situation that's tense and it's getting tenser, it's not going to go well.
Mm.
The result will not be what
Yeah.
either of you want. And it took a long time for me. I'm almost 60. It took a long time for me to figure that out and to realize that I was not getting the result that I wanted to get. And so the only thing that would help was the actual timeout. Like, okay, I need 15 minutes, but also to communicate that to your partner, because if you just run away and you're not have a discussion about it, that your partner can feel like they're being abandoned by you. And so you don't want that either to happen. It's like, you know what, honey, I'm triggered. Like whatever you just said to me triggered me, and I need 20 minutes to just calm myself down and to go figure out what's going on with me. So I'm not in a space of blame, right? I didn't say this is your fault.
Yeah.
I'm owning my trigger and I'm owning what's going on with me, and I get to take a time out and figure out what that is. And that's a practice. Anybody who's going to try this overnight, it's not going to happen the first time. It might happen the second or the third or the 10th or the 50th time, but it is a practice. And today I can still get triggered, and I can still go above that normal level of tension that comes right after the trigger. But then it's like, okay, you know what, we realize we're not getting anywhere, so we
Mm.
get to take a time out. And it's just practice.
Yeah. 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 So kind of what I'm hearing is just really like a waking up, and waking up, like being awake to yourself and to what's happening in the situation, rather than being asleep and just reacting.
For sure. When we're asleep, we're reactive and we're in a blame mode, like this is your fault, like why did you do what you did?
Right.
And those kinds of discussions, as we know, they don't end up resolving anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Blaming is very hard on a relationship. It truly is. I think that when we sort of talk about fighting, like going head to head. But I feel like when people are still going head to head, they're still really trying to make everything work. It's when you absolutely stop fighting and there's just silence and you don't care anymore and you just have your exit strategy, or like it's just so I like what you said, that fighting, even for a 10 on 10 relationship, it's necessary. It's actually really necessary to actually be close and to have connection. Would you say that's partly what you're saying?
I'm saying even in a 10 on 10 relationship, disagreements are going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not saying that fighting is a great is a great thing to have.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm just saying going head to head, but
Yeah, for sure. It's part of a 10 on 10 because when we're really honest, again, if we're being honest, and you're going to get into fights, you're going to get into disagreements. But if you're not honest and you're just saying it's all okay, and you're walking away knowing that it's not okay, that's not a 10 on 10 relationship,
Yeah,
right? You're going to sit in your bitterness and resentment, and that's not going to be a 10 on 10. But when we're really honest with ourselves and we're honest with our partner, we are going to clash.
right. Well, it's going to
And
hurt too. It's going
and
to
it's going
hurt
to hurt.
sometimes. Yeah,
100% it will.
yeah,
But that's when the timeout helps. That's when the curiosity about what's going on with myself helps. And that's when the curiosity of what's going on with my partner helps. All of that helps to rebuild the connection.
yeah. When you just said that and the curiosity, I think one of the things that is, that I've realized is that we always have a relationship with two different people. One is the fantasy person, and then there's the real person. And the fantasy person is like in our mind, that person that we had the fantasy of, like when we met them for the first 3 minutes we met them, was like, oh, they're going to be this for me, and you try and make them into that, for all those years. And then you realize that they're not. And that's what the fight is about, is like, you're not that person, but now I get to meet that person. I get to actually have a relationship with the real person, and see that I've been trying to make you into a fantasy. And that's what it seems like. That would be very intimate. That would be much more intimate in terms of actually what you said earlier, true love, like having true love rather than romantic love, like unconditional love for another person.
Yeah. I like what you said about having an image of somebody the way we first saw them, or the way we see that they would like to be, and we're always trying to fit them back into that mold,
That mold, yeah,
so that when they're not that person, we want to get them back into that person that's in our mind, in the mold that we want them in.
yeah,
And that's where the fights and the struggles come,
yeah,
right? Rather than just saying, oh, you know what, honey, you're having a really bad day, like you get to have a really bad day today, it's okay.
yeah, yeah. And that feels very supportive and empowering, really, to know that you can be, have all your warts and everything showing, and that other person is going to just love you and be there, and allow you to just be imperfect, because I think that's one of the things women want, is to be loved for their imperfections. Yeah.
Yeah, men too, men too,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have our days also.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been great. Well, I will wrap it up there. I think that's a nice place to end. And thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom and your experience and your vulnerability. It was really a fun experience to interview you. So thank you, Eric.
It was my pleasure.
Appreciate the time. Yeah.
Pleasure seeing you.
All right. Thank you.